Welcome to Manhattan in January. We've got this beautiful snow. I'm actually really excited to see what I can get shooting around here. Why are we in New York City? Well, Jordan, Jaron, and myself came down here on an invite from Tamron to see their facilities in Long Island and just to meet a lot of the people that we've worked with for so many years but never met in person. So that was great. We had a fantastic trip coming down, but they also had something fun in store for us because look at this. I'm walking around New York City with a new Tamron 35-100mm f2.8. I think it's gonna work out really well for all the snow and stuff that we have here. I'm Niccolls. This is PetaPixel. Let's enjoy Manhattan. So the weather in New York City might not always be welcoming, but you know what is always welcoming? B&H. And it's not just a great place to escape from the rain and snow, it's also a wonderful place to get pretty much anything you could possibly think of that's photographic or videographically related. I mean, it's an awesome store with tons of stock, and there's a really great way to buy your gear here at B&H. Get one of their Payboo credit cards because this gives you two really big advantages. You can either buy gear and then save the sales tax. B&H will refund all the sales tax back to you when you make a purchase.
To check your eligibility for Save the Tax benefits, visit bhphoto.com/payboo.
Or you have another option. You can finance expensive purchases over 6 months or a year using that B&H Payboo credit card. And this way you can just spread the payments out a little bit longer, maybe make it a little bit easier on yourself. But as always, remember that this is a credit card, so use it responsibly and that you do have to get approved for this card.
To learn more, visit bhphoto.com/payboo.
So look into getting your own B&H Payboo credit card today. It is provided to you by Comenity Capital Bank. All right, guys, we're taking a nice little stroll here through Madison Square Park, and you know, you can hear the snow falling on all the oak leaves here. It probably sounds like something's frying in the background. It's snow. And you know, we could talk about how rugged this lens is, but before we do that, let's talk about the handling on it. So they're not labeling this as a G2 because it's the first 35-100 f2.8 they've made here for mirrorless. And this is actually coming out in Sony E mount, but also Nikon Z mount. That's interesting. So you're gonna have another 2.8 zoom option for Nikon Z mount. It looks exactly like all the other Tamron G2 lenses, however, because they have this very nice, simple, understated build. And I've always liked the design of this. You got that sort of silver gold ring there on the bottom. That's their brand ring. Oh, and don't worry. I know what you're thinking at home. You're like, Chris, please tell me it still has a 67mm filter ring. Otherwise, my world will no longer make sense. It does have a 67mm filter thread. We're all going to be okay, all right? In fact, it does feel and look almost exactly in size and weight like the 28-75 f2.8 G2. Very similar kind of look. You know, the rings feel the same. The zoom ring feels the same. But what I do like is, although the other lens does have a customizable button, this does give me a 3-option selector switch. So it actually enhances how much I can customize this button and what it can do on the fly. Now we get to the USB-C port here on the side of the lens. I don't normally mention this too long, but I do want to talk about it here. It's going to be a little bit of a sidetrack because, of course, this does let you connect to their app, and it's one of the best lens apps ever. You can customize a lot of functionality on the lens, like is the focusing be linear or non-linear response? You know, what direction does the manual focus ring actually turn and stuff? So it's really nice you can customize this, but they are just now updating their app and their system. It's now 5.0 for the Tamron Lens app. It now works on iOS. That's huge because before that it was just Android, and they now have a new unit that clicks into the side. This is a Bluetooth connection dongle. This lets you then connect to the app wirelessly, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do there, which we'll probably talk about in another video. But anyways, let's also talk about, can this lens even handle rough weather like we have today? Now, of course, with all the snow coming down here, but it's still being somewhat warm, you know, just above freezing, we're going to get melt all over the lens, and I can already see water forming. I'm not really worried though, because you know, these higher-end Tamron lenses are built to a very high standard. We've got good weather sealing, we've got rubber gaskets all throughout, the lens mount is sealed, and even the exposed USB-C port has no issues with a little bit of moisture. So I've always found these Tamron lenses overall to be quite rugged. Yes, lick your lips, Jared. Yes, yes. Why did Tamron make this lens? I mean, this is a question I've been asking myself since I first saw it. I mean, right away, when they showed me the lens, I was like, what? Hang on. So here's Tamron's intention, and it does make sense. The 35-150 f2 to 2.8, one of our favorite lenses. I mean, awesome, like event lens, low light lens, journalism lens. Couple that with a nice little 16-35 or 20-40 and you're set, right? But it is a big lens, it's a heavy lens, and it's an expensive lens. So why they made the 35-100, the logic behind it is people still want a fast lens, but they might not want that size and bulk. Of course, we're not also getting 150mm. This is going to give you a bit of reach, 35-100, f2.8. This only weighs like 570 grams, so it's like less than half the weight of that other 35-150. And so I do get the logic behind that, but what happens when you consider that there's also a 28-75 G2 f2.8? Against the 20-75, we're talking the same filtering, of course, but also basically the same weight, basically the same size, basically the same price, and we have only a minor focal range change, right? I mean, I personally like having that 28mm coverage. I know a lot of you guys out there love 35 and you're fine with that. And again, if you're going to couple this with the 16-35 or 20-40, that does make sense. 75mm to 100mm, yeah, it's significant, but it's not a huge difference. And so look, I'm really excited to shoot on the streets of New York City here with this lens, but at the same time, I'm a little bit skeptical that it might have too much overlap with existing optics. So this is a mystery I'm gonna have to solve. And you know, this is a great place to do it because some of the greatest minds have contemplated life's mysteries walking around the streets of Manhattan, and then there's this guy, but you know, I'll do my best. So Tamron have a long history now of using their VXD, voice coil extreme drive motors. They're linear motors, it sounds really cool, and they actually work really well. We've seen this in the G2 lenses. We now have a VXD motor in here, and as you can see, for autofocusing test here, we got nice long streets down Broadway, and the autofocusing is just super fast. So for street photography, for action, for any sort of professional work, no problems. I feel like the lights here give us an appropriate scenario to talk about the bokeh on this new lens. You know, it is an f2.8 aperture and it does push to that 100mm focal length, so we'll get a little bit shallower depth of field than something like the 28-75 f2.8. And this makes a lot of sense if you're going to shoot portraits, you know, or street photography where you want to stay a little bit further away from subjects and still get a nice soft background. So let's take a look at those specular highlights. As you can see at f2.8 in a portrait situation like this, Jaren's looking beautiful and so is that bokeh. We're getting that really nice cat's eye effect, which gives us that swirly look around people. I really dig that. When we stop the lens down, things still stay nice and round. We're not really getting any polygonal shapes here. And if we look at the actual bokeh itself, yeah, there's a little bit of schmutz in there, but it's not bad. Soap bubble effect isn't strong or anything. And so overall, I actually really like the bokeh on this lens. I think it's soft, it's got nice transitions. I'm not seeing anything to be overly frenetic or harsh looking. So they've done a really good job here. And I think it's very much in line with what we've seen out of the other professional G2 f2.8 zooms. All right, guys, so we had a fun time walking down Union Square. As you can see, the snow's really coming down now. And I'm going to keep exploring New York City, but you know what? We're not going to get any flare tests today. My test charts are at home. We were given the lens here in New York City, so I think we're going to head home eventually, sadly, but we're going to finish the rest of the video, so we'll see you then. Well, we all had a wonderful wintertime experience in Manhattan, but now we're back in Calgary where for some reason it's all above freezing and just sunny days every day, but that's okay because we had a lot of testing to do when we got back home. We wanted to put the Tamron up against our test charts as well as get some flare examples, which of course this weather's been perfect for. And we got some really good results here with the Tamron 35-100 f2.8. I mean, first off, flare very well controlled at f2.8, good contrast still, not really any ghosting, and even stopping the lens down heavily, you can see the ghosting is incredibly minor. So this lens is absolutely handling these bright sunny conditions no problem. Another thing I want to test was Bokeh, longitudinal chromatic aberration, where you get color fringing in the foreground and background out of focus areas. Really hard to get rid of it post. I mean, you know, having an f2.8 lens, we can get some shallow depth of field, especially at the long range. But as you can see here, Bokeh, you can see a little bit of it, but this is still what I would consider minor. I'm not really worried about it at all. All right, now let's talk about sharpness. Looking at our test charts here, first at 35mm in the center, brilliant performance, great detail, shooting wide open at f2.8, still very good contrast. When I stopped the lens down at f5.6, I really didn't notice much improvement. Corners are actually quite decent at the 35mm range as well. I'm happy with the look at f2.8. 5.6 will sharpen things up slightly, get a little bit of vignetting, but honestly, 35mm at f2.8 is fantastic all the way through. 100mm is pretty close, but I will say in the centers, we're still getting excellent sharpness, but there's a little bit of a loss of contrast. You can see when we stop the lens down to f5.6, that contrast just comes back. But again, it's still good wide open. I would shoot it there. Corners, again, similar story. Decent performance at f2.8, gets a little bit better when you stop down to 5.6, but overall, this is a sharp lens throughout its range. I'd be happy to shoot at f2.8 for portraits or landscapes and not worry about the detail. So I have to admit, guys, I'm a little bit confused by the purpose of this 35 to 100mm lens. I know Tamron is saying that this is supposed to be an alternative to their excellent 35 to 150. It's less money, it's much smaller, much lighter, much more portable. I get that, but the 35 to 150 has fantastic utility because it goes that extra distance. I feel like if I had an ultra wide zoom and the 35 to 150, I wouldn't necessarily need to go to a 70 to 180 or 70 to 200, and I could cover a lot of cool stuff like weddings and events with that two lens combination. That's how a lot of people are using it. On the flip side, what about comparing this to the 28 to 75 G2 f2.8 lens? I feel like there's a lot of overlap there. And again, for me personally, if I was gonna go on a travel expedition or doing a professional photo shoot, I'd prefer to have the 28 to 75 and a 70 to 180 so that I have that range covered with a nice wide angle. So then for me, where is the reasoning for this 35 to 100? Well, I think it comes down to using it as a standalone lens. Because where the lens really impressed me was absolutely on the streets of Manhattan as a street photography zoom. I mean, I've got my classic 35mm wide angle look for documentary style street photography, and I really appreciated having that 100mm just to give me that little extra reach, not only for portraits to separate subjects from the background and stuff, but also just so I didn't have to get quite as close, but still get a nice tight frame. And I thought it did a brilliant job at that. If I coupled this with a wide angle zoom, like a 16 to 35 or something like that, yes, that would give me more flexibility, but I feel like I would still be wanting in the telephoto range. So I'd want to add, again, a 70 to 180 or 70 to 200 to my kit. And then I've got 3 lenses. So I still feel like the 20 to 75 makes more sense for my style of shooting. But if you tend to go more towards that telephoto range, you don't shoot the wide angle as much, and you're looking for a good general purpose 2.8 zoom, this might be right up your alley. However, there's no denying that Tamron's made a very useful f2.8 zoom. Hopefully this will give you a good idea if this is right for you. We always got to give Tamron kudos. If there's focal ranges that other manufacturers won't touch, they just say, watch me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Leave your comments below. We appreciate the feedback. Check out the PetaPixel podcast. It's on this exact same channel, or you can listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. And do consider getting a PetaPixel.com membership. It helps us out more than you know, and you can see all the great benefits here on screen that you're going to get. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.